A hearing to consider a new trial for the man serving a life sentence for killing a young girl nearly 36 years ago has ended, but a decision won't come for at least several months. 66-year-old Dennis DeShane was convicted of the murder and sexual assault of 12-year-old Sarah Cherry of Bowdoin in 1988. DeShane's trying to make the case that tests conducted by a California lab excluded his DNA from several items found at the crime scene. But prosecutors say there was plenty of other evidence and his DNA could not be excluded from several other items. A car repair receipt and notebook belonging to DeShane were found outside the Bowdoin home where the victim was babysitting before her abduction. Yellow rope used to bind her hands matched rope in DeShane's truck, which was parked near the location where the girl's body was found. Now, DeShane contends the evidence was planted while he was doing drugs in the woods, and DeShane has a fierce group of supporters who say he could not be the killer. As the current condition of the evidence and advances in forensic science are key points in this hearing, both sides have something to say on how the decision should move forward.
We have to understand that this happened 36 years ago, and even though we have new testing now, the items that they're testing are still old. And so it may or may not apply. It's been very interesting because this is the second time that they've come forward with new DNA testing. Technology is going to continue to get better, but the evidence is still old.
Well, they've raised those issues all along, and as they raised those issues all during the past 36 years while they were stonewalling the DNA sampling that he wanted. And that's what they did. They stonewalled it for 36 years. It caused it to degrade because of the delay. I told the judge, please, because they caused the delay, would you please interpret the evidence in favor of my client? Give my client the benefit of the doubt. He did not cause the delay. He did not cause the degradation. He wanted the testing done. And the state held it up for 36 years, and the evidence isn't quite what it used to be, and that's their argument.
The Maine Supreme Judicial Court has denied several previous requests for a new trial, concluding there was sufficient evidence to convict DeShane regardless of the updated DNA test.